It was recently revealed that leaders and officers in the Young Republican National Federation from multiple state chapters, including New York, Kansas, Arizona, and Vermont, exchanged messages in Telegram group chats over months in 2025 that contained praise for Adolf Hitler, Nazi references, and racist, anti Semitic, and homophobic slurs, among other kinds of verbal hostility. Now, racism, anti Semitism, sexism, homophobia, or any of the other isms and phobias have always presented problems in our country. And this incident shows that they're plaguing our country right now. Now, in a desire to understand this problem better, I went to a great resource, a classic on the theme by the author Gordon Allport called The Nature of Prejudice. He tells us that the underlying problem is just that, prejudice. He defines prejudice as, quote, an antipathy based on a faulty and inflexible generalization, unquote, directed at a group or an individual as a group member. Now, to translate that, what he's saying is that when you dislike a group or a member of that group based on some incorrect assumption about all members of that group, that's prejudice. For example, when our president says that all undocumented immigrants are criminals, or all Democrats are lunatics, or all Haitians eat cats and dogs, these are examples of prejudice. Allport tells us that the process that leads to prejudice is normal. We have to put things and people into categories to make sense of the world. Prejudice happens when these categories become rigid, aren't open to facts, and lead to hostility. Prejudice happens in part because we naturally form in-groups and out-groups. I'm a Giants fan, and so I hate Eagles fans. I'm red, so I hate blue. I was born here, you weren't, so I'm good, and you're bad. These feelings may have very little to do with the actual individual members of the out-group. Our loyalties don't necessarily lead to hostility toward the members of the other group. But many of us do define ourselves in terms of the other side of the fence. To quote, they think a great deal about outgroups. They worry about them and feel under strain. To reject outgroups is for them a salient need, unquote. He then goes on to show that these negative attitudes toward outgroups can grow in intensity. There are three stages. The first stage is called antilocution, which is simply saying prejudiced things about members of a group. For example, when members of that Young Republicans were texting each other, one said about black basketball players, and I quote, I'd go to the zoo if I wanted to watch monkeys play ball, unquote. The second stage is discrimination. Allport defines this as when we, quote, deny to individuals or groups of people equality of treatment which they may wish, unquote. So, for example, when ICE agents can pull brown people out of cars, put them in zip ties, and send them to foreign countries against their will and without the due process protections afforded to white people, that would be a good example of discrimination. And by the way, the United Nations has defined this very thing, unequal recognition before the law, a general denial of rights to particular groups, as discrimination. Now, the third level that Allport names is physical attack. Here he tells us that though most barking, negative words, does not always lead to biting or violence, violence never happens unless it's been preceded by negative words. To quote, fully 70 years of political anti-Semitism of the verbal order preceded the discriminatory laws passed by the Hitler regime. And soon after these laws were passed, the violent program of extermination began. Now, here's where I want to quote from the book because it's an important warning about what's happening in our country today. Allport tells us that in cases where violence breaks out, we can be fairly certain that the following steps have prepared the way. There's been a long period of negative talk about the group. The pattern of blaming them is deeply rooted. The members of the group are not seen as individuals. There's a growing pattern of discrimination. The people of the in group have increased struggles. They suffer economically. They have a sense of low status. Irritation about political developments grows. Now, check this out. Here's a direct quote from the book. People have grown tired of their own inhibitions and are reaching a state of explosion. They no longer feel that they can or should put up with unemployment, rising prices, humiliations, and bewilderment. Irrationalism comes to have a strong appeal. People distrust science, democracy, and freedom. They agree that he who increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. Down with intellectuals, down with the minorities. Now, organized movements have attracted these discontented individuals, and from such a social organization, the individual derives courage and support. He sees that his wrath is socially sanctioned. Unquote. That's where we are right now. The only step left is for some incident to occur to spark the violence. That's the next step. We're that close. If Allport is right, our present leader has brought us to the precipice of violence. Now, J.D. Vance, our vice president, responded to the young Republicans' texts by saying that these were jokes and what kids do. He told critics to grow up. But if Allport is right, if it all starts with verbal hostility, this kind of language is the necessary beginning of violence, and there are too many of the other factors that lead to violence that exist in our country today to take these remarks as anything other than deadly serious.